All right, everyone, welcome to today's show. We have a sad show to discuss with you today. We're going to be discussing the Uvalde school massacre that occurred a few days ago here in Texas, at an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. We're going to be sharing with you our thoughts, the timeline of what happened, and giving a legal analysis of the legal ramifications of the actions of the police. So stay tuned after this, please.
That Corbin and Corbin legal team fighting for the rights of the people. That father-daughter team investing in the youth when the system ain't treating them equal. Providing truth for our people, we able to reach them. So anytime you get accused for a crime and Lord knows you ain't do it, we here to get you through it. Exemplifying prudence and glorifying God, making sure you're compensated for other people's doings. Our vision is to be one of the best. We're small enough to focus on your matter throughout the neighborhoods of Dallas. Working constantly and making sure your rights are protected. A firm team of lawyers, aggressive, effective. The team that has your back in the courtroom. Two well-spoken black lawyers in the courtroom. Investing time and resources when it's evident that you were treated wrong. Now you walking out of Dallas courtroom with a settlement. Corbin and Corbett, the father-daughter legal tag team that has your back in the courtroom. Our purpose is simple. To obtain a favorable outcome for each client and glorify Christ in all we do. Our vision is to be one of the best and most...
Hello, everyone. This is attorney Chloe Corbett, also known as the Duchess of Justice. And with me, I have
Attorney Augustus Corbett, aka the Minister of Justice.
we are your defiant lawyers. We provide legal analysis of trending politics, policies, personalities, and pop culture to empower you to defy this unjust legal system. Before we get into today's topic, a very tragic topic, why don't you please share this video with your family and friends? Leave a comment down below with your thoughts as we continue through this program. As we discuss the Uvalde school massacre that occurred here in Texas, we have a very special guest today. Um, a woman who wears many hats in my life. A mother, wife to you, dad, first lady, um, businesswoman, former child welfare specialist. But most of all, she's a Christ follower. She's a daughter of Christ, a committed Christian. And that is my lovely, amazing mom, Antonia Corbett. Welcome to the program, Mom.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a sad occasion to be on the program today, but thank you all for inviting me.
Yes, we're so lucky to have you here, especially as someone that is focused on protecting children throughout most of your adult career. You have been on the forefront of making sure that children are protected both here in Texas and in North Carolina. You are a specialist in child welfare, making sure that you protect children from abuse, neglect, and other issues. So you were the perfect person to have up here as we discuss the serious topic and the serious matter. So welcome to you, Mom and Dad. How are you doing today as well?
I am doing fabulous, with the exception, obviously, of having dealt with this horrific event in Uvalde. Um, and that is right after. In fact, we're still also reeling from the events of Buffalo. Um, so fabulous as I'm doing as well as can be expected. Seeing and dealing with all of this stuff, Chloe, it's terrible.
It is. And we try to have a typically we try to have a fun, happy go lucky type of show. But just this topic and what we're talking about, I know that I'm not as chipper as I usually am in our other videos. So I wanted to let our audience know this is it's so sad. It's such a tragedy, both what happened in Buffalo a couple of weeks ago and then here in Texas a few days ago. So I want to do a moment of silence for all of the families who lost loved ones in the massacre, both in Buffalo and in Uvalde. So we could just do that for a few seconds. I think that that would be good. Okay. Thank you all for indulging us in doing that moment of silence and taking some time out to think about the families of the children, of the teachers that were slain in Uvalde here in Texas. Dad, do you want to kind of give an overview of what happened and start the timeline, and then we'll get Mom's thoughts as well as well.
Yes, I'm trying to get our presentation going here, so it may be best if you just go ahead. Let me get a couple of kinks worked out.
Okay. Well, Mom, let me ask you, what are your thoughts about what happened in Uvalde?
Well, like you said, Chloe, it's been such a heavy couple of weeks for the nation and pretty much also the world, those who have been tuning in to what's been going on in our nation. I've shed tears, listening to the survivals, the family members who have lost loved ones, and those who have survived these two massacres. So it's been hard. I think the whole nation is pretty much traumatized. Anyone who's been paying attention to what's going on, it's been a very traumatic couple weeks, and not even couple weeks, but really couple of years with this pandemic. So yeah, I think it's time for us all to be reflective and to do assessments of our family, our loved ones, and everything that we're doing in our lives, because these are some very desperate and dangerous times that we live in.
That's so true, Mom. And the fact that, just like you said, we're having to deal with this pandemic, and a lot of people have been socially isolated from their families. And now, as we're continuing through the pandemic, people are starting to come back together and be around loved ones that they had not seen in a while. And then they have all of these various tragedies to come. These school shootings, the one that happened in Buffalo, the shooting that happened here in Dallas against the Asian American women. I mean, it's just been a
Yes.
lot on top of the pandemic and still dealing with COVID-19. So that is the context that we're discussing all of these issues. For those of the people, for people who have not been following as close attention, just an overview of what happened. There was a school shooting here in Texas in the city of Uvalde, which is a city about an hour south of San Antonio. So it was closer to the southern region of the state of Texas. And this massacre occurred at Robb Elementary in this school in the
Hmm.
city of Uvalde on Tuesday. And it came out that 19 children and two teachers were killed by an 18-year-old gunman who allegedly killed his grandmother at his home before traveling to the school and then killing the 19 children and the two teachers. So this occurred on Tuesday, and we've been getting new information. I mean, new information, new timeline. The police have had different responses every single day up until this morning. There's still new information that has come out. So we're going to be discussing all of that, the police response, the way that the governor responded, and the things that have changed from the information that we received at first until now.
All right, so I guess this will be a good place to let's hear from the children. Let's hear from some of the survivors of this very sad situation.
most of his friends and classmates not making it out alive.
I kind of don't feel safe going to school, and I feel hot, and sometimes at night I have nightmares too.
Also, inside that classroom, 10-year-old Tess Mata. Tess adored her big sister Faith, loved making TikToks, and kept people laughing.
She put a smile on everybody's face every time was dancing. She always had the biggest smile ever.
Eva Dunia Orta's son, Rogelio Torres, also one of the victims.
That little piece of my heart, I lost my son.
The mother of four says Rogelio was loving, happy, and liked to help others.
I think about him, what happened that day, what was going on in that classroom. He was crying out for me or something. I'm just like, what was his last? What he saw last.
And Ari Garcia, she was known to love Encanto and her abuelita, Nelda Lugo, who says every time she saw her granddaughter, she would run to her and give her hugs.
Hi, Grandma, I love you.
And also being remembered, Nevai Bravo and Leila Salazar, and Alexander Rubio, or Lexi, was an all-A honor student. Her mother calling her beautiful and smart, sharing on Facebook, we told her we loved her and would pick her up after school. We had no idea this was goodbye. And this morning, unimaginable tragedy compounded. Just days after teacher Irma Garcia was gunned down, her husband Joe Garcia dying of a heart attack. The two were about to celebrate their 25th wedding anniversary. One of his final moments, laying flowers at the love of his life's memorial. They now leave behind four children, seen here overnight at a mass for the family, held in the pastor's embrace.
A 9-year-old survivor of the elementary school shooting in Texas is talking about the tragedy. He says his class was watching a movie right before the mayhem. They heard loud bangs and teachers telling them to hide.
Yeah, the fourth grader and his friend got under a table to stay alive. As Henry Ramos reports, the boy was inches away from the gunman and witnessed the unthinkable.
We shot our next person's door, and then we have a door in the middle, and he opened it, and then he came in and he crouched a little bit, and he said it's time to die. When he shot, it was very loud and it hurt my ear. When I saw the bullets on the floor, it was real.
Recounting the nightmare, this fourth grader, a survivor of the mass shooting inside.
Okay, let's stop there. That is a lot to take in. A lot. It's overwhelming, quite frankly. The sadness of all this. The kids who were murdered, the ones who survived. Thank God that they survived, but still, it's something that they're going to have to deal with for the rest of their lives. And then on top of all of that, the husband of the teacher who passed of a heart attack just days after his wife was murdered, leaving 4 children. Can you imagine what those children are dealing with? I mean, these things, like Jesus said, these are the kinds of events that try a man's soul. This is extremely distressful. And it's the reason why it's the reason why we wanted my wife to come on this morning, this afternoon, because she has spent the better part of 25, 30 years, in many of those years, protecting Texas children as a CPS, Child Protective Services investigator, supervisor, and then child safety consultant for the state of Texas. And this is her space. Tony, you recently retired, but you know all too well what this is all about. You've overseen many cases of child's death, but obviously nothing like this.
Yes, you're so right. Nothing to this magnitude. And it's just sad all the way around. And I'm glad you mentioned about the children who did survive. We are so thankful they survived, but they will need a lot of help, professional help, because what they've gone through is what we call in the mental health profession adverse child experiences. So this qualifies as such a traumatic event for these children. And I certainly hope that the state of Texas and the ISD there in Uvalde would definitely get these kids the therapy, the support that they need, because they are needed in the long run, for many, many years to come.
Well, we unfortunately we couldn't see you. We could hear you, but you have your feed is locked up. Um,
Mm.
yeah, we can't hear anything. You just locked up
You
for.
couldn't hear me?
No, we
I
can
can
hear
hear
you. I'm
you all.
sorry.
You can't see me?
We see a still shot of you. In other words, your
Oh.
video feed has locked up.
So what do I need to do?
Um, you need to sign back in, but I don't think you know how to do that. So we may, I don't know, may have to just let you talk with your picture up here. It's the only thing I can think of because I know you don't know how to do it, how to log back on. So I'll see if there's anything I can do. Um, let's play another video.
Well, I was like hearing like loud noises. Like it was like really loud. What did you think they were? Well, at first they sounded like something like popping, like kind of like fireworks.
Oh, so when you heard the firework type sounds, you think it was far away from you or close to you?
It was like I heard like it like a little like far, but I heard it like really loud.
So it
Like
was
I heard it
louder.
like following me.
And was your sister with you
And
when you
she
heard the
saw,
sound?
yeah. Well, at first a lady came to the classroom and knocked on our door, said the principal here. She said, "Go and hide," and we turned off all the lights and went to the back of the classroom and put desk in front of us, and we were hiding.
Did you
I
know
don't know if
where
the audio can be heard.
why you were having to hide
Oh,
and close the door?
I
why do you
just
say
got a
that?
notification.
Oh, really?
Hmm.
It has said
Oh,
that we were having a real because we
okay.
practice a lot, and I think
So let's bring up the person who is responsible for all of this tragedy. Salvador Ramos. Um, so much to say about him, and none of it is pleasant. He wreaked a lot of havoc in this community, his community. So, um, I don't know. This leaves you speechless, and I'm very seldom speechless, to be honest with you. But this leaves you speechless, and like I said, it is really just a few weeks, Chloe, after you know the Buffalo shooting. And before we could, in fact, these people, most of these people in Buffalo have not even been buried yet. Before we deal with that, here we come with this situation. It's just a lot.
It's a lot, and apparently he has a violent history, according to some friends who have been interviewed by various news stations. Um, There was a report that someone named Baxter told San Antonio Express News that the suspect Salvador Ramos dated his ex friend, and when they broke up, he tried to date her, but she told him no, because he always had this kind of eerie sense about him. It was reported that Ramos was unpredictable and violent when he was dating her friend, and the friend said that he was allegedly scary, like he could get super violent and he would lose his temper, and that she was scared for her life. Um, the 17-year-old told the news station that Ramos would send her these really nasty messages where he'd go from super sweet to screaming at her back to super sweet. And she said that he was overall just aggressive. He was violent. He would try and fight women. He would try and fight anyone who told him no. So this is someone who said that he dated her friend. And then his mother also spoke out, and she, Adriana Martinez, she said that she insisted she had no idea what led her son to snap. She said she thought that he had his reasons for doing so. And quote, she said, "I have no words to say. I don't know what he was thinking." She said he had his reasons for doing what he did. Please don't judge him. I only want the innocent children who died to forgive me. Forgive me, forgive my son. I know he had his reasons. Reasons? There's no reason to go to an elementary school, take a military grade semi-automatic and or automatic weapon and shoot 19 children and two teachers. There's no reason to do that. So I don't know what his mom means by that. She goes on to say, to get closer to those children instead of paying attention to the other bad things. I have no words. I don't know. She was pictured praying on her porch of her parents' Uvalde home. She said that Ramos was not a violent person, quote, but he could get aggressive when angry. Um, Her father said that Ramos had been living with him and his wife. These are this suspect's grandparents, because he had problems with the mom. So it seems like there's a lot of issues with this suspect, with this gunman. And according to reports and according to even his own mom, he could get aggressive. And according to other reports, he was violent with women. So he was almost like a ticking time bomb when all of this went down. And it's just so sad.
Yes, it is. And we're going to talk about why he ended up with two AR-15s in just a moment. How does that happen? How does a guy like this end up with these guns? So that's where we're headed. Now, your mom is back with us. I don't know what happened, sweetheart, but you're here, right?
Yes, I'm here. Can you all see me?
Yes,
Yes.
we see and hear
Okay.
you. So,
Okay.
all right, let's talk a little bit about Texas and children. Okay, there are some issues, with Texas and children, and those issues may have indirectly played into what happened. So, this is your field. You wanted to share some statistics, Tony. So I'm going to pull those up now.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm not seeing them. Okay. So Texas and its children. Texas has the most children in poverty than any other state. In fact, it's like 1.4 million children who live in poverty in the state of Texas.
Hmm.
Also, Texas has the 12th highest child poverty rate, the 12th highest. child poverty rate of all the 50 states. And poverty overall, Texas rates 13th in the nation. Also, Texas has the ninth highest number of families with annual income below $10,000.
Wow.
Also, I don't know that you have another slide, but I have some additional stats. Do
Yeah.
you
I
have
mean,
another?
just no, we don't have that, but just go ahead. Just share with
Okay.
us your insight and knowledge about Texas and its children. Or
Okay. And Governor Abbott, I was a former employee with the state of Texas. I just retired the end of 2021. And of course, Governor Abbott in his news conference had said that, anyone who shoots someone else has a mental health challenge. So he, as well as some of the other elected officials, are really zooming in on mental health. And of course, mental health can play a part, but I don't want any of us to just dump every mass shooter, saying that the problem is just mental health alone. But with him saying that, it just caused me to do some research, and I found out that Texas rates 50th of all the 50 states and the District of Columbia in children having access to mental health programs. Now, we rate last in the nation for children having access to mental health programs. So, of course, with me being a child advocate, and we know how children are dealing with so much stress, and we're living in this social media age and a lot of dysfunctionality in homes, our children do need mental health. So, one of the things I would say is that we definitely would want to improve in the funding for mental health programs, but we can't stop at that. You know, as a child advocate and studying in this field, I've also found out that I don't know how much the audience knows, but males' brains develop, are not fully developed until they are about 25 years old. So one of the things I would want to propose in all of this that we're looking at would be to raise, the age limit for people having long guns to at least 21. Let me just share with you that it says here the rational part of a teen's brain isn't fully developed and won't develop until age 25 or so. The adults, we who are adults, we think with our prefrontal cortex part of our brain, which is the part that helps us to rationalize and to make good decisions and to understand long term consequences. But for teenagers, for teenagers, they use what professionals call the amygdala, which is the part of the brain which is more rational, which is more in tune with how you feel. And so that's why any of us who are parents know that our teenage children can really get into their feelings, can be impulsive. And that's because their brain has not fully developed. So I really do think that there are some other things that we can do along with strengthening our mental health system, but also helping our children to have a better overall um, satisfactory living condition. And that would include the economics, better jobs. That would include definitely having access to health care. That would include, in my opinion, having more trained counselors and social workers and even therapists on our school campuses. So we can't, it's not just a one thing will fix this problem, in my opinion, as a social worker, but it has to be a multifaceted approach. So I just wanted to bring some of that out to you all today.
Now, some people may push back and say, well, Um, that's all fine and good, but that should not have any effect on, access to guns. We don't need gun control. We know the NRA just had their convention at the same time as all of these facts are coming together. So what will your response be to, you know, you're talking about holistic approach of making sure that children have access to equal social and economic statuses, mental health access, maybe later access to guns when their brains are fully developed. How do you put all of that in relation to gun control?
Well, personally, I believe we need some sensible. Now, I'm not for taking away folks' guns. I mean, we have guns right here in our home. We're gun owners, So I'm a proponent of the Second Amendment, but I do believe with the day and the time that we live in, the part of history, human history, that we are now living in, I do believe that we need some sensible gun control measures. Not taking away folks' guns, but making it harder and more difficult for people who should not have guns to have the guns. And simply that is my approach, and that's my personal opinion. And if anybody asks me who one of those elected officials, I would tell them, in my opinion, they need to get together, do their job, and solve some of these problems with all of the mass shootings. The United States is the only country which is experiencing these types of shootings at this rate and frequency, that we need to try to solve the problems. And I'm not saying take away anybody guns. Like I said, we are gun owners. But I do believe we need to make some kind of change so that the wrong people do not get their hands on the guns.
And you're saying it needs to go beyond gun control, right? It needs to go to the children's home and having better access to mental health and all of that.
Yes. Yes, I believe all of that. Because just think about it, you all. Dylan Roof was age 18. The the um the young man who did the massacre in Buffalo, he was age 18. We
Mm.
have this young man, age 18. These are teenagers. And then also remember, we had the Virginia Tech shooter. He was a young person. So something is going on, and we as a society and as parents, we have got to be involved and try to solve and find out what is going on with our young people, because this cannot continue to happen like this. I mean, we are really just declining as a nation because of all the violence. Keep in mind also that right now, and this is the first time in US history, gun violence is the number one cause of death amongst our children. And that's not just African American children, that's all children. It used to be car accidents, but now gun violence is the number one killer of children by way of suicide or homicide.
Mm. That's staggering. That statistic, I
Yes,
mean, that statistic is absolutely mind blowing. That in a developed nation like ours, the number one nation in the world, um, most, I mean, children die the most by gun violence, homicide, or
yes.
suicide. I mean, that it's hard to even wrap your mind around that.
And we cannot pretend like, everything is just hunky dory. It's not. There are some serious issues going on in this country, and it's affecting our youth, and we who are the adults, we who are the elected officials, we who are the professionals, we who are church leaders, we have to save our children. by way by extension, we save our nation.
Now, you said that young men, since young men mature later than young women, you said that
It's
young.
not it's not just mature. I'm not just talking about maturity. I'm talking about brain development. This is what researchers are saying. Brain development. In fact, I have this one. So I'm not just talking about, boys are being sillier than girls, but their actual brains are developing, much later, um, fully developing where they can make more rational decisions.
Okay. And for that reason, you suggest that the age that a young person can buy an AR-15 should be increased um, from 18 to 21.
Yes, that's my stance. That's just one. Now, that's not going to solve, and really, nothing that we do is going to solve all of these shootings. But that's just one thing I can think of that we can change immediately would be to raise the age to 21. Because as I understand it, you have to be 21 by federal law to be able to purchase a handgun. So why not make that the same standard for purchasing one of these long guns?
That's a good question.
Okay.
I mean, think about it. Think about it. You can't even across the nation, I believe, and you all correct me, you all are the lawyers. You have to be age 21 in order to even drink alcohol. But yet, our 18-year-olds can go and purchase these long guns, and we know that the long guns are the instruments that are being used in these mass shootings.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you can be 18 to buy a weapon, but 21 to drink alcohol. Why
Right.
is that discrepancy? We know it's because of the money in DC and all of the lobbying that the NRA and these other guns rights groups do, but um, it's just a question that needs to be solved by our elected officials. And I agree with you, Mom, to change the laws as well.
All right. So we're going to
Yes.
come to some of the gun laws in just a moment. Let's let's look at the actual incident. The moment I heard the law enforcement officers, Tony will tell you, it didn't sound right to me when they started describing how they responded to this young man and to this situation. It didn't sound right to me because of what I know is typically required of active shooters. Just didn't sit right with me. And I actually made a post about it 2 or 3 days ago. Um, so, yes, it has now been acknowledged and admitted that law enforcement did not handle this well. And so I want to go now to a clip by, let's see, by the DPS director, Steve McGraw. Okay, let's see if I got that teed up.
Hey, with the benefit of hindsight, stand by, stand by, stand by, all right? I got it. Okay. Hey, for the benefit of hindsight, where I'm sitting now, of course it was not the right decision. It was the wrong decision. Period. There's no excuse for that. But again, I wasn't there, but I'm just telling you from what we know. We believe there should have been an entry at that as soon as you can. Hey, when there's an active shooter, the rules change. It's no longer, okay, it's no longer a barricaded subject. You don't have time. You don't worry about outer perimeters. And by the way, Texas embraces active shooter training, active shooter certification, and that doctrine requires officers, we don't care what agency you're from, you don't have to have a leader on the scene. Every officer lines up, stacks up, goes and finds where those rounds are being fired at and keeps shooting until the subject is dead, period.
Okay. That is the top cop for the state of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And he laid it out. And so when I heard all this stuff that was being said, it didn't sit well with me because it's called rapid deployment, I believe. And basically what it means is when law enforcement shows up on the scene of an active shooting, their job is to go get that shooter. Go get the shooter. Go get the shooter. Stop the shooter.
Mm-hmm.
And pursue until the shooter is dead. That is basically what is required. So when I heard the very first day that some officers started pursuing the shooter but then retreated, my antennas went up. What do you mean retreated? That is not what's supposed to happen with active shootings. And remember, that was the school resource officer in Florida, where all those people were killed, is being, looked at now for that, because allegedly he did not pursue the shooter. So with an active shooter, you got to go get the active shooter. You're a law enforcement officer, you're a police officer, you FBI, whatever you are. This may cost you your life or what have you, but you got to go get that shooter. That's what the colonel was saying just then, Colonel McGraw, because that's what it is. And Texas kind of made that famous, quite honestly. And so why that didn't happen in this case, so it is baffling. So let's now look at the timeline. Let's look at the timeline, because it shows how badly this was botched. Okay? So, timeline. 11:27 a.m. This all came from DPS. This all came from DPS. By DPS, folks who are not from Texas, the Department of Public Safety, Texas Department of Public Safety, the highest law enforcement agency in the state of Texas. We're originally from North Carolina, and DPS is like the State Bureau of Investigation back in North Carolina. Okay. So they are the ones who do come in and do the investigation and so on. And so pursuant to their investigation, at 11:27 a.m., a teacher props open a door to this school. At 11:27 a.m., Ramos crashes a vehicle near the school into a ditch and begins firing. There were some citizens out there that he started firing at. The teacher runs to a room to get a phone, returns to the door, and the door remains open. So the teacher didn't close that propped open door for whatever reason. 11:30 a.m., the first 911 call is received. At 11:30 a.m., the Uvalde police officer called U.S. Marshals for assistance. At 11:31 a.m., the shooter starts shooting outside of the school. I think that's when he started shooting through the windows inside the school, but he was outside shooting inside. A patrol car drives by the shooter, but he's hunkered down by another vehicle. So he's hiding beside another vehicle. Those officers didn't see him. At 11:32 a.m., the suspect fires at the school, again firing through the window. At 11:33 a.m., the suspect enters the school from the back, and watch this. He fires over 100 rounds shortly after entering to that school. I suspect that most of the kids were killed with that burst of gunfire. 100 rounds. And he brought with him over 1,000 rounds.
Mm.
So at 11:33 a.m., he released 100 rounds. And again, by now, I believe he's inside a classroom and shooting those kids at this
And
moment.
for those unfamiliar with guns, that rounds, is that the bop bop bop
Yes. Bop, 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 bop. Since it's an
automatic?
AR-15, it's not completely automatic, or it shouldn't be. You know, completely automatic is pop, in AR-15, you gotta pull the trigger, so it's pop, 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 pop. Still rapid, but 100 rounds he could do in seconds. Now, I don't know what kind of magazines he had. I don't know if he had to reload a magazine or if he had a magazine that could do 100 rounds. But I believe it was at this moment that those kids were shot. At 11:35 a.m., 7 officers are on the scene. 3 entered the school. Two received grazing wounds from the suspect. So they shot at him, and again, from what I understand, they suffered some wounds and somewhat retreated. Okay? And that, you all, if that's right, that's where that's the issue. Because if it's 100, if this guy has shot 100 rounds at this point, children are in there, many of them seriously wounded and bleeding, and they need help. They could possibly be saved, but they need someone to come in and get them, kill him, and get them. Okay? Now look at what time this is. It's 11:35 a.m. 11:37 a.m., 16 more rounds were fired. Okay? That occurred from 11:37 a.m. to 11:44 a.m. And again, all of this came from DPS, Colonel
Which have
McCraw.
been changing their stories, but that's
Well,
a different discussion for a different day.
yeah, you're right. They spent 2 or 3 days giving contradictory versions. But this version here, I think is reliable.
And my question real quick is, so when he enters the school at 11:33 a.m. and fires over 100 rounds, and I know we're going to get to this in the timeline, but when the chief of police of the school district police, thought that it was not an active shooter and barricaded him in the classroom, I'm wondering where these 100 rounds were shot at. As soon as he entered the school, the classroom where he killed a lot of the children as well. I don't believe that DPS answered that effectively, or the police have.
Well, again, I think it's safe to assume that when he entered that building at 11:33 a.m. and released 100 rounds, he released those rounds in those children. Right at that moment.
But the part that I don't understand with the chief of police for the ISD, why he was still thinking it was a barricaded subject situation when after the 100 rounds he heard, according to the timeline you just
Well,
read, there were other shots.
let's keep going through the timeline.
Okay.
There's a lot more. These timelines are very, very important. They reveal a lot of information. 11:43 a.m., Robb Elementary announces on Facebook that they're in a lockdown status, basically telling people to stay away. 11:51 a.m., now this is 18 minutes after that 100 rounds. So kids presumably at this point are bleeding out. They're injured at the point of death. Some may be dying. They need help. They need help. And let me go back to that 11:30 a.m. Moment. Those 100 rounds should have been fired at the officers, not at kids. That is the point of engaging the active shooter. You want to keep the active shooter's mind on you, law enforcement. You know, you want him, hey, pow, pow, pow. You want to be shooting at him so he's not focused on the kids. So by retreating, you're giving him the chance to get himself together, and so that he can start or continue firing at his targets, these 9 and 10-year-old children. So this is 11:51. This is 18 minutes after 100 shots were fired, and presumably into defenseless children who were locked away in classrooms. 12:03 p.m., 19 officers at this point are standing in the hallway right outside of the school, of the classroom. Kids are in there bleeding out. Kids are in there dying. Now, you hear a little passion coming from me because I'm a father. This is heartbreaking, etc. But also because I'm an attorney. And I'm telling you how I see this case legally. I'm sorry, this is emotional. This is 30 minutes after this person released 100 rounds. Again, keep in mind, kids are in there wounded, dying, bleeding. They need help. 19 police officers are in the hallway.
While they're keeping border agents out of going into the school, I read that federal border agents came to assist.
Let's follow the timeline. All that's in the timeline. Okay? 12:03 p.m. A girl called 911. Why is that significant? Because it says not everyone in that room, in those classrooms, are dead, which therefore means go get them. There's still life to save. That call was significant. Now, what we don't know is whether that 911 call got to the guys, to the boots on the ground. We don't, Colonel McGraw I don't recall him saying one way or the other. 12:10, the girl called 911 saying many people are dead. So she calls back 7 minutes later, which again tells you, or those officers more importantly, there's still life in there. And they're depending on law enforcement to come and get them, to come save them. 12:13 p.m., the girl makes another call begging for help. Begging for help. Her classmates, her teachers are in there bleeding out, hiding. I believe this is the same little girl who smeared one of her classmates' blood on her so that she would appear dead, so that he wouldn't shoot her. I believe. I'm not sure. 12:15, Border Patrol arrives. And that's what you was just saying, Chloe. Go ahead.
Yeah. So at this point, when Border Patrol arrives, and keep in mind these are federal law enforcement agents. Um, the local police officers instruct them not to go into the school. Reportedly, the chief of police of the school district is under the apparent belief that this is not an active shooter situation, that the shooter is barricaded. So Border Patrol stays outside for some few minutes, listening to the instructor of this school district police chief.
That's right. And this somewhat reminds me of the military. I'm a military veteran, and there is a chain of command. The um, the the chief of the Uvalde Independent or Central Independent School District, he was the man in charge. This is his jurisdiction, so he made the call. And it's my understanding, this is what the colonel said. He made the call that this was no longer an active shooter. Instead, it was a barricaded suspect, and which essentially means no more shots are being fired, and everyone now is presumably dead. So why, at this point, risk officers' lives trying to rescue children who are probably dead? That was a horrible assumption. It was a wrong assumption. It was a terrible assumption. And a lot of kids probably lost their lives because of that assumption. So yes, Chloe, Border Patrol, a tactical team, okay, not just regular officers, but a tactical team arrived with the tools and the know-how to go and get this guy and put this to a stop.
I think they're called Bartak. But what doesn't make sense to me, and I'm fired up. I haven't even talked about why I'm so fired up, but if the officers are in the hallway outside of the classroom and they're hearing shots fired, we're going to get to it in the timeline. How do they think it's a barricaded situation and not active? But
yeah, here's the thing. They are under the command of, okay.
And of the police chief. Well, why didn't they tell the police chief, no, sir, there are shots here. I hear shots being fired.
Well, eventually they did. Eventually they said, no, we're going in. Forget that. Later for that, we're still hearing shots. 911 calls are still coming. We're overriding him.
After an hour. So I'm a little fired up too, Dad. I get it. And
yeah.
I know Mama is too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
12.
Because you know what? Before you go on, this morning I thought about with child safety, the team I was on with the state of Texas. One year we had a theme of ours was good decisions equal child safety. And this is what I thought about with this chief of police. And we know he was probably doing the best that he could, perhaps. But I'm just saying, good decisions equal child safety. And in this particular case, the director of Department of Public Safety for the state of Texas said this was a wrong decision. And we see the results of that.
And they had just done drills at this school just a couple months before for this type of situation.
Yes, they had drill training in March, from what's being reported.
And it was
into more.
It was ordered by the officer, the chief of police for the school district.
Yeah.
All right. 12:17. Robb Elementary again reports the shooting on Facebook. 12:19. Another child called 911. So here again is another indication that this is not a barricaded suspect. This is an active shooting. 12:21 p.m., suspect fires again. What does that say? This is an active shooter. You got children that are alive, making 911 calls, begging for help, and you got a shooter with them shooting. 12:21 p.m., another 911 call is received, and 3 shots fired are heard. I mean, make sense out of this, you all. How is this an active? How is this not an active shooting?
So even if they did not get the communication from the 911 dispatchers, I mean, they have had to have heard the gunshots, wouldn't you think?
That's what this says in the timeline. It says here at 12:21, at 12:21, suspect fires again. Another 911 call is received, and 3 shots fired are heard on the 911 call. So the 911 dispatcher heard the shots.
But I'm saying, what if the dispatcher did not communicate to those who were in the hallway or those on the scene? If they did not communicate, my question is, wouldn't the officers still, they were right there, they would have heard the gunshots, wouldn't they? Even
Yeah,
if they didn't get any communication from the dispatcher.
yes, they would have heard that. Again, I can only speculate that they were respecting the orders of the person who's in charge, and they were presuming, I suppose, that everyone was already shot. I mean,
But how could they already be shot when, I mean, but
but we're
the
assuming that
shooter
they,
was,
but we're assuming that they didn't that we're assuming that they did not receive the information from the 911 dispatcher. I mean, that's hard to believe, right? It's hard to believe that a 911 dispatcher from the state of Texas doesn't have the technological wherewithal to get a 911 call to the folks on the ground during an active shooting situation. I'm
but
I'm
not only, but not only that, my question is, okay, let's say they did not have technologically advanced, means of communicating. I'm saying, would the officers outside the door, did they not continue to hear gunshots?
And I think
That's what
what
you're
Daddy is
saying.
saying, Mom, is that with the, being in the military and how these police departments work, they were listening to their commander.
That's right.
So they heard,
Is
but
what
the
he's
commander,
speculating.
and the commander was still making the decision, no, it's not an active shooter, even though gunshots were still going on. So that's what we're saying, right?
Apparently
That
so.
that and the question at this point is, this is almost an hour later. The question also is, are there any survivors? Because if they're thinking there are no survivors, then they're thinking, why risk the lives of these officers trying to kill this dude? We can take our time killing him if there are no survivors in that classroom. And they would have known that. They would have known that there were survivors had they been informed of the 911 calls, which we don't know happened or didn't happen. We don't know.
Yeah. We got a comment from Alicia. Hey, sis. She said, and she's the mother of a 9-year-old, soon to be
Yep.
10-year-old in July, who's in 4th grade going into the 5th grade. But she said, in her opinion, better to ask for forgiveness than permission. They should have acted. And I'm sure a lot of parents feel that way.
No question.
Yeah.
In fact, there were parents out there begging them to go inside and put this guy down.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's a great point, Alicia. 12:21 p.m. Officers move down the hallway. So they start moving down the hallway. Another child called 911. How many 911 calls are this? That's probably 5 at this point. These kids are begging for help. 12:43 and 12:47 p.m. 911 caller says, "Please send police now." These are
These are
kids.
9 and 10-year-olds saying this.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Yes. Begging for help. 12:46 p.m. 911 caller can hear police next door. So the police are very close. 12:50 p.m. shots are heard being fired over the 911 call. So this guy's still in there shooting children to death. Wow. This is just harsh. This is hard to fathom. Law enforcement breached door at 12:50. Law enforcement breached door using keys from janitor and killed a suspect. What time is that? 12:50.
12:50.
This started. Hold on. This started at 12:03. They breached the door and killed the suspect at 12. No, sorry. No. Actually,
11:33 is when he took the
Yes.
first round.
yes, my computer is not cooperating with me here. What's going on? Yes, so yeah, 11:33. It is now 12:50. What is that? How much time is that?
An hour and 27 minutes?
Inexcusable.
And when it says law enforcement, it's my understanding that it was the border patrol agents that came in and breached the door.
Yeah, they said what you suggested earlier, and what Alicia said, and so on. That forget this. We're just going to have to whatever. We'll deal with it, but we're going in. And they went in.
Wow.
And one was I read was an off-duty border patrol agent who heard it over the radio, hopped in his vehicle, drove 40 miles to Uvalde, and then he led the charge into breaching the door.
Wow.
Sorry. All right, so this is the officer, this is the chief right here in the dark colored uniform that made the call. According to Colonel Stephen McGraw, DPS director. And I'm not here to just condemn this man. I'm sure he did what he thought was best.
Yes. No, I agree. Because
Me too.
anybody can
Say
quarterback
this
on Monday
now.
mornings.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, his actions will be, seriously scrutinized for years to come. One would hate to be in his situation, but no, I'm not going to bash him, but his decision was just horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I was reading too is the city of Uvalde, it only has a few thousand people. I want to say about 10 to 15,000 people. But 40% of the city of Uvalde's budget goes to paying for law enforcement.
Mm.
So the city of Uvalde Police Department, 40% of it goes to their budget. 40%, almost half,
Mm-hmm.
goes to
Yeah.
paying for the police. And like I was saying before, so the school district, they have law enforcement. The city of Uvalde has law enforcement. The county has law enforcement. This is a town and city and region where law enforcement's presence is very heavy, and they have a lot of support. And yet, because of
Right.
this wrong decision, they let down the people of this region, of the parents, this town. And it was reported that a SWAT team from the city of Uvalde had just run drills, like you said, in March a couple months ago. They were outfitted with all of the newest kind of military equipment. And for me, it was heartbreaking to hear when everything was first being reported, where a DPS, I think, spokesman said the reason why the officers didn't breach earlier is because they were, and I don't want to misquote them, but to paraphrase, I think it was they wanted to save their lives. I hope I'm not misquoting him, but it was something to that effect.
Yeah, I'd heard the same thing. I can't. That's a, I that's what was said allegedly is the way I would say that. I heard the very same thing.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk a little bit about legal accountability here. Who can be held legally accountable? Well, of course, the officer, the chief, and the Uvalde Independent School District. Now, Chloe's going to explain to us in a second here how all this works. DPS and potentially the federal government, the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. And they were all there when this was going on. And so someone should be held accountable. But there is something called sovereign immunity. So, Chloe.
Yeah. So I think there's going to be a lot of lawsuits that come out of this, from family members, from school staff, etc. Unfortunately, I don't believe a lot of them will be fruitful, or will continue past the earliest stages of litigation because of this concept of sovereign immunity, which basically, the state of Texas is immune from being sued. It's an idea that goes back hundreds of years, back to England, where the King of England could not be sued for anything that he did. And as we started our own legal system here in America, that concept was carried over. So it's hard to sue government. It's hard to sue the government, and it's hard to sue the state of Texas. So specifically, the state of Texas cannot be sued in its own courts without its consent, and then only in the manner indicated by that consent. So, in order to sue the state of Texas for damages here in Texas, Texas has to consent to be sued, and it has to be in a specific manner.
Well, let me jump in here, Chloe, and say I'm glad you brought that part out, because I think that the state of Texas is going to definitely consent to this lawsuit. I would think because the negligence is so glaring and damaging, and all these children. So I think that as you indicated, if they consent to this, and I believe they will, then this family, because there was a case not long ago when a bunch of people were murdered inside a church here in Texas. About 26, 27 people were murdered by an ex-Air Force person, and they were able to sue the federal government and won a large settlement, actually.
Yeah.
But go ahead,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just glad you pointed out that if Texas waives their immunity, these families can hopefully get some justice.
Yeah. And we hope that the state of Texas does. So these families can get damages, and we hope the state of Texas consents to being sued. But the general overview is that the state of Texas has sovereign immunity and generally cannot be sued for torts, for personal injuries, for wrongful deaths like this, for intentional torts, unless they consent to it. Now, there is something called the Texas Torts Claim Act,
Well, now
which,
before you go there, I want to highlight something you also said too. I don't think folks heard, but this was carried over from England,
yeah,
right? It, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's it's like, you can't sue the king, right? I mean,
hmm,
yeah, you can't sue the king. The king is the king. The king basically owns you. You're the king's subjects, so you can't sue the king. And so this is really, as you said, a carryover from that. You can't sue us. We're sovereign.
yeah, we're sovereign. We're above all of this. If we cause harm and you get hurt or injured, we, you can't sue us for that
And,
unless we give you permission to.
and a lot of times, we attorneys will turn down cases when it's involving a school district or some other state agency, for the very reason that you're bringing out.
Yep. Yeah, because it's
Wow.
difficult. It's so difficult, and it gets stopped in the early stages. So you can file the lawsuit, and then the state of Texas will make a plea to the jurisdiction or say, there's no jurisdiction for this case. We're not going to give you permission to sue us, and then the case gets thrown out from the very beginning. Unfortunately, a lot of times. Um, Now the state of Texas have granted citizens the right to sue them by statute, and that statute is called the Texas Tort Claims Act. Okay. That's section 101 of the Texas Civil Practices and Remedies Code, and it grants permission to citizens to sue the state of Texas for certain specific limited circumstances. And I'm going to give you some. So, with respect to a personal injury claim, there are two grounds in which, under the Texas Tort Claim Act, you can sue the state of Texas. If there's property damage, so if you were in a motor vehicle accident and your car was damaged, if there was personal injury, so if you suffered bodily injuries, if you had to go to the hospital, get therapy, etc., or death arriving from a state's employee's use or operation of a motor vehicle while in the course and scope of his employment. So basically, if a state employee is using a motor vehicle and they're on the job and they cause property damage, they cause you bodily injury, or they cause death under the Texas Tort Claims Act, you can sue the state of Texas. Okay. And the personal injury or death must be caused by a condition or use of tangible, personal, or real property if the governmental unit would, if it were a private person, be liable. So basically, what that means is when you're suing for the personal or real property, if the government it would be liable as a private person would, then you can bring that lawsuit. So if a person, like I said before, suffers some type of vehicle damage, property damage, a personal injury, or death with a state employee who was on the job, and that employee causes those damages, then under those limited circumstances, the state will grant permission for you to sue them under the Texas Tort Claims Act.
Question.
Hmm.
Now, I believe another exception is if the allegation is that Texas violated your civil rights. Do you think that this situation could involve civil rights since these are Hispanic children?
I think it could. Um, there may be a Fourth Amendment claim or a 14th Amendment claim. Equal due process of the law, equal protection of the law. I think there may be a 14th Amendment violation by the state of Texas, by the police response. Um,
What
I think the,
about what about a section? What about a 1983 claim?
potentially. Now, and for the listeners, a 1983 claim is a section under the Civil Rights Act which allows law enforcement agents to be sued for civil rights violations. But I think the issue is these families would have to prove that there was some statute or that the police officers violated something under the color of law. So they would have to prove that there was some policy, maybe that waiting an hour before the police off before they breached the classroom, that was a policy that was in set and that they violated.
Well,
And as of now,
they obviously did.
but I
I
haven't read
read
where there's actually a policy where you must go ahead and go in.
There is.
There is.
I don't know if it's an actual written policy. I just know that it's called rapid deployment, and it is the training that law enforcement has received over the past decade or so. When there's an active shooter, go get him. I'm sorry, Tony, I
right.
cut you off.
And the DPS director, that's what he said, that Texas embraces that active shooter certification training. So they definitely, this is what the DPS director was saying, that they did not follow proper training. And I also read that the DOJ, Department of Justice, is opening up some type of case looking into the actions of the police
Okay.
that was present there that day.
That's good. But I don't know if that, what is it called, that the name of the
I think it's called rapid deployment.
rapid deployment. I don't know if that's actually a policy by the school district police force. That's something that plaintiffs, attorneys, and people are going to have to look into. Is that an actual policy or procedure of this Uvalde school district, or even of the city of Uvalde police department?
Well, according to the DPS director, it was somebody there, because you had so many different categories of law enforcement. Somebody there should have followed that active shooting training certification that they went through, is what I had inferred
Yeah,
from his comments.
I think that's the accepted um, response to active shooting nowadays.
That's what I've heard other law enforcement that kind of nationally, that's the accepted response, is that you first, if there's an active shooter, and see, that's why I believe the DPS director was saying the decision making by the chief of police for the ISD. That's why he said he did not think it was an active shooter, because if he had said, yes, we have an active shooter, then the training should have kicked in and they should have gone into the classroom. But he said, no, it had transitioned into the barricaded suspect situation.
Yeah, I mean, as the colonel said, when it's an active shooter, point blank, period, you stack up. That means you get man behind man behind man, and you go and you get this person. And if he's picking you off as you go, then again, that's a part of your job. But don't stop until he's stopped. And then those bullets, those 100 rounds, are being fired at law enforcement and not those defenseless children.
Yep.
So you're keeping him preoccupied, and you're also trying to kill him as quickly as possible. Okay. All right, Chloe, you got more on that?
Yeah, I just want to expand a little bit on your question about the Section 1983 law claim.
Okay.
So, for everyone listening, it's just a civil rights lawsuit filed by someone who believes that their civil rights have been violated, and the victim can file the lawsuit if they believe the wrongdoer, the police in this case, were acting under color of law. And we were just discussing whether or not the police were acting under color of law. I agree with my mom and dad that they were, because I mean it's accepted practice and custom, and apparently they were trained to go in and breach and not just let the shooter go. Um, so They could bring, so the families of the victims could bring this 1983 claim, and some of the things that the Supreme Court recognizes as a deprivation of civil rights when your civil rights have been violated is police misconduct, such as excessive force. We have a few of those cases, unreasonable use of force. Um, when police officers go into your home and they violate your rights that way. Um, if there's a state official that has sexually assaulted someone and a whole list of other things. So I do believe that what happened here is would be viable under under section 1983.
Yeah, the difference here is that these are omissions,
Yeah.
rather than acts, right?
Yeah.
They omitted doing something.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume, like you did, Chloe, that still should be able to come under 1983, or something, the state of Texas or Border Patrol, the school district, somebody should be accountable to these parents. These parents deserve justice. Nothing can be done to bring back those children, but the state of Texas needs to acknowledge in a real way with damages, economic damages, what happened to these children.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Tony, you have any more on that? Otherwise, we're going to move on and talk about gun control.
No, I don't have anything else.
All right. So, gun control, because that is what a lot of people are saying is needed to address this issue. And obviously, when you talk about gun control, you're going to run into the NRA, the National Rifle Association. And you're also going to run into the Second Amendment. All right. Now, there is a seminal case, Second Amendment case, that was handed down by the United States Supreme Court in 2008. The District of Columbia versus Heller, basically where D.C. said that its citizens could not own handguns. And the case reached the U.S. Supreme Court. And the U.S. Supreme Court hadn't decided a Second Amendment case in many, many, many years. And in this case, they basically held, and I'm quoting them, "There seems to us no doubt on the basis of both text and history that the Second Amendment conferred an individual right to keep and bear arms for self-defense in the home." In brackets, I have unrelated to service in the militia. But this right is not unlimited. So the court affirmed that American citizens, pursuant to the Second Amendment, have the right to bear arms for self-defense. So when you talk about gun control laws, you're going to run into the Second Amendment, and you're going to run into the largest gun owner right organization in the country, the National Rifle Association. And it has considerable power and influence, especially, I would say largely, maybe specifically over GOP politicians. For the record, for full disclosure, I am a huge Second Amendment defender. Huge. Big time. Okay? So, I just want to put that out there. The Heller opinion recognized the dangers of gun, hence the country doesn't violate Heller by trying to keep guns from bad people through universal background checks. So I heard you all kind of snicker a little bit when I emphasize how big a Second Amendment defender I am, but I am not like some of these folks who are opposed to all types of gun control laws. Basically, for me, and Tony, you said it earlier, actually. Basically, for me, it is keeping guns out of the hands of bad people. And one of the things that we can do to try and accomplish that is universal background checks. Okay? So, what do y'all say here?
I
I
think that
agree.
oh yeah.
I agree with that. I think
Yeah.
even with when you mentioned about the ex-Marine who um, shot up um, what one of those
The
military
church.
bases. Oh, the church. Okay, the church.
Mm-hmm.
That he had not his information. He had been convicted of a domestic violence charge, I believe, and the Air Force had not um, enter his conviction into the database, the National Crime Information Database. So I think if we could just begin, if everybody would just get on board to let's do what we can do to try to make sure that violent people do not have access to the guns. That would be a step in the right direction, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree, Ma. And I don't know why it's so, to me that shouldn't be controversial whether you're on the left or
Right.
right,
It should
pro
not.
gun, anti gun, right? I mean, gun control, having background checks. People have to get background checks um to do a whole host of types of jobs. So why not get a background check to have a weapon that can take someone's life? I don't get why it's so controversial at all. At least that. Can we at least not get that passed in Congress, in the Senate, and on the president's desk to become law? Like, come on. Because we've had all of these, like we were saying earlier, mom and dad, we've had all of these massacres, Buffalo, Parkland, here, a whole number of shootings. Nothing gets done. Sandy Hook,
Right.
absolutely nothing gets done. That needs to stop.
I
Congress,
agree.
these politicians need to do something and stop talking around in circles and putting their head in the sand and just waiting for the next tragedy.
I agree.
Well, I agree too. I mean, I just don't see a point. I don't see the reason in opposing universal background checks.
Right.
I would say this. I would say this. Gun control laws typically will impact law-abiding citizens. Criminals are not going to obey and gun control laws, right? So every law that is passed to control guns, it's going to impact the people who are not a real threat anyway because of guns, because they're law abiding. There are what, 400-500 million guns in this country.
More guns than people. Yes.
More guns than people.
Mm.
So that basically means that whatever you do, guns are still going to end up in the wrong people's hands. But if universal background checks can save one life, can prevent one mass shooting, can slow down one person from doing what this guy did or what the guy did in Buffalo, it's worth it.
I agree.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm a big proponent of raising the age to 21. I really am, because that would have, at least legally, Dylan Roof would not have been able to get a gun. The individual in Buffalo, nor this individual. And like I said, nothing we do is going to just eradicate all mass shootings, but just make it more difficult for it to occur in this nation. That's what I'm
Uh,
saying.
can we flesh out something real quick, Dad? Because I kind of disagree with the previous statement you said.
Please,
Um,
please, absolutely.
about could you say it about how gun control measures are not gonna stop criminals from getting guns, basically, right?
That's right. Criminals are not going to. Criminals don't obey the law. I mean, they're criminals, right? So they're not going to be like, okay, I better not buy that gun because I'll be violating the law. I mean, they're probably buying the gun to violate the law. So if you pass, so whatever laws are passed to curtail the sale or transfer of firearms, basically it's only going to impact law-abiding citizens.
But I
But
don't
isn't that the
understand.
case with?
Yeah, go on, Chloe.
I was
Go
just gonna
on.
say, isn't that the case with all laws? I mean, people are gonna murder people, but we still wrote laws to say that different types of homicide or what is legal and not legal. People are going to possess drugs, but we have drugs about drug possession laws. So to me, that's not a reason not to pass gun control measures. Because I mean, that's with any law that we write. Criminals are going to be criminals are going to be bad people out there who are not going to obey the laws that we set. But I still feel like that shouldn't stop our officials from putting these measures in place.
But you're
Because
forgetting.
I'm
But you're
go.
forgetting. You're forgetting. You're forgetting one thing, and then Tony, you go ahead and make your comment. You're forgetting one big thing, Chloe.
But you're forgetting. Sorry.
You know what that is?
What?
The Second Amendment.
Yeah.
But see, but there are already some laws in place, and we also have all this data of what's been going on for the last 2 decades. So we're not trying to get rid of the Second Amendment. We're just trying to make sure that people who would do harm to the citizenry in this nation, it's not easy for them to do that harm
but
because
but again, the people who are doing the harm are not going to be impacted by universal background checks. They're not going to submit. In fact, let me bring this up.
no, I agree with that. But what I'm saying, okay, if it's the good people, then the good people are going to pass the background check. So how is that? I mean, you have guns, you pass the background check. That did not hinder you from owning guns.
Right.
So how's it gonna
I'm smiling because
have
this
it
is how we are, guys at home, talking about these topics. So
having having universal background check is not going to harm law abiding citizens. They
No,
still will be able to have their guns.
well, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that it's going to look. The inconvenience of a background check to me is worth the potential of stopping another one of these shootings, whether it's a mass shooting or whether it's just, in the Black community, we deal with more gun violence than anyone, right?
Right.
So if a universal background check is going to prevent that, one of those kids or one of these mass shootings, I'm all for it. It- you know, AK Nation News says that I won't use the term he used or she used, but basically I agree that the guy out on the street corner doesn't care about gun laws at all. Do you really believe, homeboy out on the streets is going to say, "Yeah, man, let me fill out this form." This, in fact, I have this form right here, ATF Form 4473, is what you're supposed to is what you're supposed to fill out before when you buy a firearm from what's called an FFL, Federal Firearm Licensor. You are supposed to fill this form out, and I have every time I've purchased a gun, every time, and I've had to wait sometimes 30 minutes to an hour for me to pass that background check. Then I'm able to get my gun and go about my business. That is a small inconvenience for me. But Billy Bob out there, or Baby, or whatever out there on the streets, they're not going to be encumbered by this.
I agree with that. Okay, we agree with that. That's what Chloe was saying. Criminals would be criminals. The bad actors would be the bad actors. What I'm trying, and even with that, when you talk about in our community, I think that's a whole nother issue they need, the elected officials also need to address. Because how are those guns, illegal guns, getting into the hands of, you know,
Yeah,
Baby
that's a whole
and
nother
them?
issue. But
Right.
but it's
So
but
they're not addressing it. They are not, the country is not addressing any of this gun violence. That's what I'm saying. So you're making my point. They're not looking at guns that's coming across these state lines. They're not looking at the people who are bringing in the guns to our neighborhoods, the urban communities. They're not looking at the manufacturers. They're not looking at anything because they just hide behind the Second Amendment. Whereas our children are being killed by gun violence. It's the number one killer in this nation. So there are so many different ways you can look at this that we're not even doing. We haven't started to do it. We're not doing it
but
because
but I
we don't
think you
care really.
but I think you miss a point that I told Chloe earlier. Do you there is the Second Amendment. Why should I be denied the right to own my firearm because of what street dude or white supremacist is going to do if he gets his hand on the gun? That's a violation
But
of my Second Amendment right.
but see, now I think you're thinking, who's saying, I'm not saying to ban assault
I didn't say that.
rifles.
I didn't say ban assault
So
rifles.
so then what, how would you be denied having a gun? When I'm talking about sensible, responsible, common sense gun safety, just expanding the background check. How is
The-
that going to affect you and other law abiding people from
here-
not having their guns? I just don't get that.
here's a case in point. Here's a case in point. And Chloe, you're right for letting everybody know this is our family. This is what we do.
Literally.
Literally, you got strong-minded people who argue these issues. All right, so case in point. A few weeks ago, this guy came, I think, from the UK and went to a Jewish synagogue right here in this area,
Hmm.
and tried to harm some people. Now, how did he get a gun? He allegedly went over to South Dallas, okay, an area that, we know about South Dallas.
Right.
So if you're trying to get, your hand on a gun quickly, cheaply, that's going to be the place to go. Although, if you want to get your hand on a cheap gun, you can also go up to North Dallas, where the rich folks are too. Okay, so I'm not singling out South Dallas. This guy just happened to go there. And within a short period of time, he flashed a little money. He got a firearm. He didn't go to Dick's or Academy Sports or any other place and fill out this form 4473 and get his gun. He didn't do that at all. He just went to. I am going to use this word that AK Nation News used. He went to the black market. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and he was able to get his gun fast, cheap. Okay, and so
Mm-hmm.
uh, gun control laws, unfortunately, will not prevent those kind of people from getting their hands on guns. That's
And,
the only point that I'm making. That's the
and
only point.
I agree with that, but it's just like what Chloe said. People they drink alcohol before they turn 21 and they go drive a car. I mean, people break the law. I get that. But what about those people who we can catch, who we can screen and say, no, you cannot have a gun because you have a conviction for domestic violence. No, you cannot have a gun because whatever the rules are to say you can't have a gun, just screening those people, at least keeping those out. The criminals are
Okay.
gonna be the criminals.
I mean,
Now,
I
I do want to push back on mom just a little because apparently this 18-year-old he didn't have a criminal history, so he was able to turn
Okay, and
18, go
exactly,
buy the two guns.
and that's why I'm a proponent. Raise the age limit to 21 at least. At least
Yeah,
that would
I
give you
agree with that.
3 more years before
I agree
these
with that.
teenagers can be out with these assault rifles or semi-automatic rifles.
okay.
I
I'll,
just think the
go ahead, Chloe.
I was just gonna say I just think the analysis just has to because like you all, I support the Second Amendment. I'm about to go buy a gun. You're about to help me, Dad. Choose one. We've been discussing it for months. You've been telling me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think like okay, I think like every analysis of about whether a law should be valid or whether a statute should be passed, you have to kind of use what we learned in law school, the compelling state interest. So, at what point do the rights of an individual, like the Second Amendment, a right to bear arms and have guns, balance that with public safety and protecting others? And I think once we do that and try have a big conversation, a deep conversation about balancing those two interests, then maybe we can actually get something in place that will help prevent these type of massacres that what happened in Uvalde.
All right. So that's why I want to move to the next screen. All right. First, this form, get an eyeball full of this form. This is form 4473. This is the form that all FFLs are required to use before transferring a firearm to someone. Okay? This form right here. This is it.
So what is FFL? You talking about federally licensed
Yes.
entities or something? Okay.
Yes. Federal firearm licensor.
Okay.
All right? Now, here's the problem with this form. This is what we're talking about right now. Number one, it's not required for all gun purchases. So there are loopholes.
Mm.
Okay? I just said every FFL has to do this, but gun purchases that are done, private sales, for example, doesn't require this. Or, someone who's not an FFL doesn't require this. Okay?
By private sale, Dad, do you mean like you sell your gun to someone?
Yes. Let's
Okay.
let's say, for example, you're about to get your firearm. Let's say, well, Chloe, here, I got one for you. Okay? Just go ahead and take this. All right. All right. So I'm not required to have you to fill out form 4473.
And I believe, and I'm just telling you, I believe you should be. I believe you should be. You know what? I
We
do
just
because
discussed this. She and I just discussed this a couple of days ago. And go ahead, Tony. I'll respond.
I believe that you should be required to do a check, a transfer of gun, some kind of paperwork. I remember when our son Caleb, when he bought his first car, he bought it from one of my coworkers' husband, and they had to do a transfer of paperwork and go to the state or somewhere and let them know that the ownership of the car was being changed. I mean, why not even with the guns?
I
So
agree with that too.
I believe you should. I
I
really
don't.
do.
That to
And
me makes
that's not taken away from anybody being able to have a gun. It's just doing some background.
that
And it's enabling the state agencies to keep up with who has what. And I know you're going to have your element of people who are on the black market. They're not, they're under the radar. We got that. That's an urban segment of our society, the bad actors. But I believe you should.
all right. That to me really makes no sense. If why should Chloe and I be burdened with having to go and do a 4473 for me to give my daughter a firearm when I
For
know my
accountability.
well,
For
but
accountability.
let me just finish though. When I know that she is a law-abiding citizen, when I know she's not a violent criminal, when I know that she does not have any mental illness or anything like that, I know that. I know that. So why should I be required and she be required to do that? But I said to you, I said that I would be willing to inconvenience us to have to do this form 4473, even with my children, if it would prevent a bad person from getting a gun. That's what I ended up saying. It makes no sense to me. I believe it's an infringement of my, or at least my and Chloe, or whoever this person is, Chloe. It infringes on our Second Amendment right, but I would be willing to do that if it would prevent someone from getting a gun who shouldn't have one.
Well, see, I think I believe part of the problem here is that there are so many guns out in this nation.
Yeah, but
And
stay right here on this point.
I
A
believe this
father
is what.
transferring his firearm to his
Yes,
child.
because everybody's child is not law abiding, and I think that the government should know that. Okay, your son can't have this gun because he had a conviction of X, Y, and Z, which prohibits him. That's not infringing on your Second Amendment right. That's within the law. I mean, you are going to show the law that says who can and who cannot have a firearm.
But
So that's not.
a responsible father is not going to transfer, should not transfer a firearm to his child
They
that
do
he
it all.
knows is a convicted felon or is someone who's
What do
going to go
you
out.
think happened?
But
What do you think happened there in Sandy Hook? The mother knew that her son had some mental health, some
That's a whole
serious mental
different
health
issue.
challenges.
Mental illness
That-
is a whole different issue. We're going to come to that in just a second.
But I'm saying, but that mother still did not act, in my opinion, responsibly enough because she allowed her son to have access to her guns.
I
So
will
you're gonna
say
have parents.
in Texas, a felon possessing a firearm is a criminal offense. So there's already that check in place.
That's right.
I think that's what
But
Daddy's saying
but
too.
but if Bob has a son who's a felon and you're not required to do a background check, Bob still would give his son a gun.
And
If,
if law enforcement finds out, Bob's son would be charged with a felony offense.
and
And
maybe
I,
Bob
that
too.
And yeah,
Under
and
Bob too.
federal law, Bob will be charged as well.
So I think there are some checks for that, even though there's not, because Bob and his son are not FFLs. If his son is a felon and he gets caught with that firearm, I mean he's committing a crime. He
And
could be
Bob
charged,
for
and
giving
Bob
him.
too.
Yeah.
So
and
I already feel like
I
that
don't
check is already in place, man.
I don't believe that I don't believe they're even enforcing that. I don't believe they would do anything to Bob for giving his son. That's how in love with guns I think this whole country is. And they're going to do the minimum.
I gotta push back, man, because we represent people who have been charged with felon in possession of a firearm. We haven't represented any parents, I don't believe, but
And that's
um,
what I'm saying. Your daddy was saying even the daddy Bob is not gonna get anything. They're not gonna trace all of that like that,
Yeah,
in my
yeah, they
opinion.
do, Tony, all the time.
Okay, okay,
yeah,
All the
okay. Well,
time.
that's a good thing.
Yeah,
That's good.
all the time.
that's a good
And
that's a
and
good that's a good situation then.
and let me say for the record, one of the reasons, maybe the biggest reason I'm such a second amendment defender is because as an African American,
yeah,
there are 400 years of us being victims of racial terrorism. The latest being Buffalo.
I
If
agree with
if
that. Hmm.
anyone should bear firearms, it's African Americans,
yep,
Right.
right?
yep,
And
yep.
Hmm.
and not just because of white supremacists, violent white supremacists, but also because we're victimized by our own race a lot.
Yeah.
Yes.
Most of the
Hmm.
time, it's black on black. Let's keep it 100.
Well, I'm not talking about taking away firearms from
When
people.
sweetheart, sweetheart, when you are over there sound asleep, I'm tipping, listening, watching so that I can protect you and
I
our
appreciate
children
that.
while when they were, under our roof. So some of this comes from that place as well. I hear all that, but at the end of the day, in addition to being a provider, I also got to be a protector.
I
And
don't know. I hope you all are not getting from this that I'm saying, don't be a protector, take away everybody's guns. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I believe there could and should be some just common sense gun safety.
all right, here we know we have this conversation all the time. I'm actually glad we're having it on the air.
This is what the politicians need to be having. They not having
Exactly.
these
Right.
conversations.
Right.
All right, so Form 4473 is not required for all gun purchases like personal sales we just debated, gun shows, okay? All
Hmm.
right. Then there's the Charleston loophole. Okay, this, even when a Form 4473 is completed, um, the FBI has 3 business days to complete that background check. If they don't complete that background check in 3 business days, the FFL can go ahead and sell that gun to that person.
Hmm.
Mm.
And
Interesting.
and that is precisely how Dylan Roof received his firearm.
Mm. I didn't know that.
That's why it's called the Charleston loophole.
Oh, okay.
That's a loophole that needs to be closed.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay? So if the FBI doesn't return a yay or nay in 3 business days, the FFL can go ahead and make that purchase without violating federal law. And that person could have just killed 10 people.
Mm.
Wow. Well, see, that's what I'm saying. I would reiterate what Chloe said. I think the politicians should get together and whatever loopholes they can close them
Yep.
and still not, be infringing on folks' rights, Second Amendment rights.
There's
It's
too
Yep.
just
much money in it,
really,
though.
yeah, yeah,
All right.
there is.
Here's another one. All right. Mental illnesses are not reported. And I got several slides to show on that. All right. So just want to throw it out there right now. under federal law, a person must have been involuntarily committed to a facility or adjudicated as a mental defective. So when the FBI runs the check, if the person has not been if the FBI has not been notified that the person has been involuntarily submitted to a facility, or if the FBI has not been notified that the person has been adjudicated by a court as a mental defective, then that person will still pass that background check, presuming that everything else is okay. Now, before you comment on that, let me further explain that. All right, so mental illness and gun ownership. Persons with the following mental health conditions can't own a firearm under federal and or Texas law. Deemed a danger to self or others. Court ordered to receive mental health treatment. Found innocent by reason of insanity. Deemed mentally retarded. That's the law's use. I know that term is not very politically correct today. I'm using it because that's what the law says. Deemed mentally retarded and ordered to receive long-term care. Incapacitated and in need of a guardian. Incompetent to stand trial. So under both federal and or Texas law, if the FBI has received notification of any of these things, then they must deny that person's application.
Okay.
Now here's the problem. Okay? Here's the problem. First of all, these things have to be reported to the FBI.
Right. Right.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's number one. Number two, there are a whole lot of in-between situations that do not meet that high burden. Those things are very high burdens. You all, I don't know if you realize, but it is very difficult to get a person for a court to say somebody's a danger to self or others. I've represented some of these folks before Chloe and I got together. That is hard. I mean, they got to be really, really seriously mentally ill. Okay?
Yes, I've seen it. Yeah.
You've seen it in your work. Chloe and I have seen it,
Exactly.
in our work. Incompetent to stand trial. We have represented folks who had mental illness. We would file a motion saying this person's not competent to stand trial. It is not the easiest thing to get that determination. And to get a guardian if somebody's incapacitated. These are high standards. And there are a lot of people who are in between those things, right? So persons with the following mental health conditions can own a firearm under federal and or Texas law. Now watch this. Diagnosed with the mental illness, but not court ordered for treatment. Look at that. Okay, so let's go back to the guy who killed the people in Buffalo. It is reported that he was referred for a mental health evaluation. Because probably of HIPAA, that determination was not made public. But even if a psychologist or a psychiatrist, whatever, said that he had some mental illness, but a court did not subsequently order him to get some treatment, he still could get a firearm.
Right. Yes.
Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean,
I understand.
Okay.
I understand perfectly because in child welfare, so many times we had dealt with parents who had diagnosed serious mental illness that they were not complying with their treatment plan, but there was nothing we could do with them because the court didn't order them to treatment. So we would just have to remove their kids. because again, go on.
No, you go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say because it's a high bar to get people court ordered to receive treatment
Right.
because everybody in America, we all have our rights. And if those people are not showing themselves to be a danger to themselves or others, all of the things you were talking about, then they're just going to be lost in the cracks, so to speak. So
And
the
so,
only
and
thing
so,
that
and the point that you're making is that that same person, God forbid, if that same person goes home and takes the life of their child, right? When
right,
you all were doing everything you could to get that child removed, but you couldn't get this determination or get this court ordered situation from the judge, it's like, okay, we tried to. Well, in addition to that, trying to protect children from people like that, people sort of caught in the middle. Imagine that same person going to Dick's Sporting Goods, filling out a 4473, who has been diagnosed with some mental illness, but is still able to get a gun.
right.
See, I
Yeah,
don't
that's
think
what I'm
though that
saying.
all people diagnosed with a mental illness should not be able to own a gun though,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there's different levels to diagnoses,
Yes.
Right.
different prognosis. I think I think that would go too far because you have mental
And,
illness. There's different things that are defined as mental illnesses. Not
right.
everything is like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. There could be severe depression. There could be some type of phobia. There could be something else. I just think that it would go too far if anyone diagnosed with a mental illness cannot own a gun. That's too far to me.
Well, I'm glad you said that because that's the other side, and that's the reason why the bar is so high, because there are mental health advocates who
Mm-hmm.
make those same arguments to Congress, to state legislatures, and so on. And I get it. I agree with you. It's just that people like the dude who shot those folks in Buffalo and this young man fit into these categories.
Right.
Okay?
That's true.
They're
That
not
is true.
they obviously got mental stuff going on, but it doesn't reach that high burden of being court ordered to get treatment or what have you. And so, I mean, there are all kinds of signs, right? I mean, they're posting stuff on Facebook. They're doing this and doing that. But they're still able to walk into a store and get a gun because it doesn't meet that high burden that Chloe just advocated should be there. And I actually agree with her.
I agree with her too because even I totally agree with her. And that's what I was saying. Even in child welfare, we couldn't do anything about the mom or the dad if they refused to get treatment. So we would just have to remove their children from their homes because, again, adults have the right not to get treatment for their mental illness. Okay. So I totally agree that everybody who has a diagnosis with mental illness should not be restricted from having firearms. But I do say, now as a social worker, I do say though, it's incumbent upon family members. Yes, they may not legally be restricted, but if you know your son is talking about killing people or being radicalized in this political environment and just acting strange, I do think that those family members and friends should at least try to get some help or alert law enforcement or something to try to prevent a mass shooting or some other kind of catastrophe from happening.
All right, we're coming
Yes,
to that. We're coming to that in
okay.
just a moment. All right. We're
We
coming
are
to
about
that.
2 hours in, so
I
I
know.
just want.
That's why I'm trying to rush it along.
Yeah, we should discuss this on another Saturday too. It's such a huge topic.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
other group that would not meet this high bar, although they have mental illness, who yet could buy a gun, are those who voluntarily seek treatment or therapy. So they've been diagnosed with something. I mean, something serious. But they get treatment, but they voluntarily do it. That does not meet the standard. So they still could buy a gun. Could be really dangerous. But because their treatment was voluntary, then they still can buy a gun. All right? So let's imagine someone posting threatening messages, but again, never was court ordered to any kind of treatment facility. Someone hearing voices, suicidal, but again, never court ordered to treatment. So these people still can buy guns, basically because of the advocacy that we heard coming from Chloe.
And let me say this. I know we got to go on. Another advocate, Chloe, this particular guy, he's with the National Alliance on Mental Illness. He said people with mental illnesses are more likely to be victims of mass shootings than perpetrators of mass shootings. Less than, and this is his quote, less than 10% of shootings involved a suspect who had mental health issues. And this guy name is Greg Hanch, who heads up the Texas chapter on the National Alliance on Mental Illness.
No,
So,
I
yeah.
agree with both of you all that there's, that most people who have mental illness are not dangerous people, right? Most are not. And most of the people who are committing these crimes, they get a lot of attention when these mass shootings occur, but most of these people using firearms on folks don't have mental illness. So I get it. But here is a compromise, and Tony, you put your finger on it. Here's a good compromise to yet stop these folks who don't reach that high burden, but who are obviously dangerous to themselves and to others. There is something that Congress and not Congress, but state legislatures can do to yet try to prevent those people from having firearms to harm somebody. And those are red flag laws. Okay? Red flag laws. What are they? They are state laws that authorize courts to determine if a person is a danger to himself or others. If so, the court can issue a protective order that shows police to confiscate the person's firearms temporarily. Requests for this confiscation often come from family members or even authorities themselves. Okay?
Right.
So there it is. So the person has some mental illness, doesn't reach that high bar, was able to get a gun, but the family members and some authority still see some behavior that's troubling, and we need to temporarily get the gun out this person's hand.
I think that's a good compromise because,
Yes.
in the beginning of this conversation, I said it has to be a holistic approach, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And there are different factors that we have to consider.
Yeah.
It's not just one or nothing.
Right. All right. Now, only 17 states have red flag laws. Texas doesn't have a red flag law because the Republican-controlled legislature blocked such efforts in 2018 in concert with the gun lobby. Right? So this young man, had there been a red flag law in place, had his grandparents or his mom or friends or somebody said, hey, this guy is posting dangerous stuff, he's going to hurt somebody, they could have got in front of a court, and the court could have heard everything and said, okay, yeah, take his guns. Take those 2 AR-15s for now. We need to see what's going on with him.
But according to the grandfather didn't even know he had the guns. But I did see if it's true that he had been texting or posting with somebody else saying that he was going to shoot his grandmother, then go to the elementary school. To me, that's when the community would become involved and report that to law enforcement.
Yeah. So in this case, a red flag law may not have prevented this, but there are many, many, many cases where it would have.
Right.
All right.
There was a situation in Seattle where I think there was a relative who reported her grandchild because she got a hold to his diary and was able to prevent a school shooting in Seattle.
Yep. So yeah, those red flag laws are very important. We need them. Now, very quickly, protecting parishioners, churches. All right, to pastors out there, what can you do? Well, first of all, pastors, commit to providing a safe worship experience for your church and community. I think every pastor should commit to that. In light of all these shootings, including church shootings. I mean, there's Charleston, there's the one here in Texas. So people are not averse to shooting up churches. So I think a church should commit to providing a safe worship experience for their congregants and for the community. Second, consider hiring uniformed police officers after consultation with your attorney, board, insurance carrier, etc. Notice I said consider. And notice I also said uniformed police officers, right? Not just don't put a gun in the hand of your deacon and somebody comes in and your deacon accidentally shoot 2-3 other people, okay? That could very well increase the church's liability and find themselves. So I packaged that with as much as I could here. Consider it, first of all. It should be a trained uniformed police officer, second of all. And you shouldn't do anything until and after you've consulted with your attorney, with your board, with your insurance carrier. And then third of all, consult with local police or security expert company to develop an active shooter safety plan. All right. And we'll end with this disclaimer. This is nothing that was said in this broadcast today was legal advice. This is general information. Consult with your attorney and insurance carrier before taking any actions. Do not do anything based on anything we said. Laws in various jurisdictions are different. Circumstances, facts are different. So we're not saying do X, Y, Z. We're saying consider it, consult with somebody about it, look into it, because folks are, unfortunately, not averse to shooting up churches as well. All right, that's it, y'all. That's it. That is it. That is it. So we're going to end this. I almost feel like apologizing. 2 hours and 19 minutes. That's the longest we've ever done. Yes.
Yeah, long.
Yeah, very long. It's over 5. It's beyond 5 o'clock. Anyway, very, very important topic today. And I'm so delighted that, Tony, you were with us today. You brought a lot of good perspective to this. Yes. As always. You made it very interesting. You see what happens in my house. I'm married to a strong-minded woman. Okay? And she should be the lawyer in the family, quite frankly. And so we have these discussions all the time.
All the time.
All the time. This is it on various topics.
That's right.
On so many topics. Mama, thank you so much for being here. I definitely get my
for the invitation.
Strength and articulation, my boldness, courageous spirit from you. So I'm glad that everyone was able to see it, those who watched our broadcast. Thank you, Rebels, for tuning in. Make sure you like this video, comment on the video. What are your thoughts about gun control, about the police response? Please put down, your thoughts and prayers for the victims involved with the Uvalde shooting. We thank you for joining us today. We'll be back next Saturday. And with that, we're going to be out.
Peace.
Bye.
Love. Soul.
Go.